All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 176. And today, I had a weird thought a while ago, and I've been intending to make a video about it for like a month and a half or 2 months now, and every single time I either forget about it or I come up with something else I want to talk about for that day. So today we're going to talk about that, and that is the idea that significant amounts of experience can blind you to what it is that you are attempting to critique. So, from a critique standpoint, there's eventually a point of diminishing returns where your actual experience, not so much just overall knowledge, but actual experience in that field, is going to start working against you when you are trying to review or critique something. What I mean by this, there are a lot of professional critics or reviewers that they will review a game or an RPG or whatever, and they seem to be like really, really critical of it. And a lot of people will take their opinion as objective fact, and nobody will play the game, or very few people will play the game. And then later on, people will come back to it after everything's died down. They go, "Wow, this really isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be." Or people will read a review here, it's absolutely horrible, but for whatever reason they're going, "You know what, I'm going to try this anyway." And they'll sit there going, "I don't understand why this person was so upset about this." And it turns out that the thing that was being reviewed just simply isn't that bad. And the reason that happens, and I'm starting to see this more and more often now, mostly because the people that I used to trust for reviews, I don't trust for reviews anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that once you've seen the same thing over and over and over again, you start to just jump to conclusions really, really quick because you've seen it so often. To give you a really good example of a non-frivolous thing that this happened to that nearly killed me, when I was hospitalized for my depression, I was locked in a psych ward. For anyone that doesn't know, I was locked in a psych ward and nearly died there. First night there was really, really rough, and all of the staff were wonderful. I would not have survived that place if it hadn't been for all the nurses. And there was also I think they were a doctor that was going through their rotations or whatever it is. Basically, before you can become a real doctor, you have to basically be a pretend doctor. You already have like the degree and everything like that. And I believe you're already licensed to practice and everything, but you still have to go through rotations in different places before you become an actual doctor. I don't understand it completely. If someone actually is a medical doctor and understands all of this stuff, feel free to explain it in the comments. Anyway, they were absolutely wonderful. However, the psychiatrist that worked there was an asshat, was a condescending asshat. So what happened was I go in to meet with a psychiatrist, and first thing you ask, okay, what meds are you on? They're looking over my chart. They go, "Hey, I don't see any meds on here." I said, "I don't take medication for my depression or anxiety." And this doctor had a relatively significant amount of experience. They were not like old as dirt. I think they were in their mid 30s. I can't 100% remember. They weren't super, super old, but they seem to have a significant amount of experience. And so something that is extremely, anyone that has ever dealt with anyone that suffers from a mental illness that requires medication, it is extremely common for people to not want to take their medication for a variety of reasons. Um, Mental illness medication is it really, really is life changing. Whether that's a good life change or a bad life change generally depends on the person taking the medication, and how much they take. But it massively changes how you process the world. And that can be extremely uncomfortable, especially if it's someone that has been diagnosed late in life. So they've lived their entire life up to this point with the world working a certain way. And once they go on these medications, the world stops working the way they remember it. So it's extremely common for people with mental illnesses to come up with reasons why they don't want to take their medication. When I told this psychiatrist, I don't take medication because bad things happen when I take the medication. I always get the worst side effects possible, and they've never actually helped my depression or anxiety. I was saying this to give him as much information as physically possible. Hey, these are the things that always happen when I take it. If he had been less experienced, he might have gone, really? That's strange. You're saying that you've tried a bunch of different medications and none of them have actually helped your depression, but you've developed side effects from each one of them. Maybe I should look into this. That's not what he said. What he decided to say was, listen, I know you probably don't like taking them, but you really need to. Completely ignoring what I've said, basically saying, hey, I get that you're lying because you just don't like meds, but you need to suck it up and take the meds because we don't want to have to deal with you when you're not on your meds. He is not the only doctor that has ever said that to me, by the way. And then he used some manipulation tactics to get me to take the medication that nearly killed me. I have no idea if that asshat is still practicing. I hope, beyond all hope, he isn't. I never filed any sort of report or anything against him or complaint against him because, to be blunt, at that point in my life, I didn't realize what he did to me. And I didn't realize just how incredibly unprofessional it was, the way that he manipulated me into taking medication that should have killed me. But again, from his viewpoint, he had heard very similar excuses over and over and over again. Well, I don't like the way it feels, or, you know what, I always forget, or he's heard these excuses 100 times before, and instead of treating them like actual information, he just went, oh, look, excuse, I'm going to ignore all of it and tell you what works for everybody else. And it nearly killed me. To get to a slightly lighter subject, I have seen the exact same thing happen with people that have a significant amount of experience dealing with something in that realm. I've seen a lot with video games. Like I literally just watched someone that's like, well, I really don't like, open world games. We'll go with that for right now. I really don't like open world games because I like, things to be, I like to be directed where I want to go. I don't want to have to explore and just wander around and accidentally discover what I want. And yet the area of the game that he was playing, that he was in, was extremely linear. And he just kept actively going away from the linear path. Like, it was blatantly, totally obvious. It was a massive road, paved road, with big signs and everything saying, this is the direction you should go. And they just actively kept fighting against the linearity. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, well, I've played other games and I know that if I see this, then that's obviously the wrong way, or that's obviously a trap or something like that, and just completely refused to think, no, this is exactly what I want, and I'm just not viewing it. Or one of the guys I really, really love watching it, and I'll actually call him out by name because, first of all, he's big enough that anything I say about him is not going to matter. Second of all, I think he's a very down-to-earth person, that if he ever was to watch this video, I think he would take the critique in stride, and he wouldn't take it personally. It's a dude by the name of Josh Strife Hayes. Josh Strife Hayes has a YouTube video series called Worst MMO Ever. They are delightful. You've got to watch them. Because what it is the introduction to him, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically goes, I'm on a quest to play the worst MMO ever, and so I'm playing every MMO I can find to find the worst one. And so he'll play an MMO, and then he just critiques it. And they're generally like 45 minutes to an hour. They're long videos, but they're unbelievably entertaining. And he goes in depth into the things he likes about the MMO. He gives you a really good idea of what the MMO's like. And some of them, despite the fact it's called Worst MMO Ever, some of them, at the end of it, he's like, this is actually a really good MMO, and I really enjoyed playing it. One of my favorite ones that he did one on Dungeons & Dragons Online. For anyone that doesn't know, I play Dungeons & Dragons Online. I have like 300 or 400 hours in the game. I love it. It's amazingly fun. I have never played with another person in Dungeons & Dragons Online. I have soloed the entire game. But it's massively, massively fun. He was playing a game that I used to really enjoy. I still go back to it every now and then. The game is called Rift, or Rifts. I can't remember if there's an F on it, or an S on it or not. Let me... Rift... Really? R-I-F-T... Yeah, it's just called Rift. So Rift was... well, still is. It's an MMO... it's a really interesting MMO. I've talked about it a couple of times on here. Josh Strife Hayes is reviewing Rift as part of his worst MMO ever. And so the thing with Rift is when you're playing the game, you pick an archetype, which is basically, fighter, cleric, thief, and wizard. So your four basic archetypes that we've talked about. But underneath those archetypes are a bunch of different classes. And the way that you create your characters, you pick one to be your starting class, and then when you start leveling up, you pick two other ones. And you basically get to mix and match abilities from each one. It's a really cool thing. The way that it works is it's a tab target MMO. It was designed to be what used to be called a WoW killer. If you played World of Warcraft, you will feel very, very comfortable in Rift. It feels like they use the same game engine. They don't, but it's near identical gameplay pattern. Like I said, the big difference is just the leveling system. So as he's playing, one of the things that happens in every MMO now is you get all these pop-ups teach you how to use everything. And he mostly ignores them because he's a big, famous MMO player. He plays all the MMOs. There's no reason why he should need an MMO. And so he plays the first hour and a half or 2 hours using entirely auto attacks to kill all the enemies. If you're unfamiliar with the term, in tab target MMOs, you will generally have an ability bar at the bottom of the screen that has abilities that have either some sort of resource cost or have cooldowns, so that you can't just sit there spamming them over and over and over again. In between you using those abilities, as long as you're attacking the target, you'll do what's called auto attacking, which is just every second or two, character will swing their sword. And if you want to get really crazy inventive with some MMOs, you start learning which abilities reset your auto attack and which ones just go through your auto attack to kind of maximize your damage. So, auto attacks in general do very, very low damage. The majority of your damage comes from your abilities. Josh Strife Hayes spends an hour and a half of the game, or 2 hours of the game, killing all the enemies with auto attacks and nearly dying every single time because he just can't out damage them before they kill him. Because he's not using any of his abilities. Why is he not using any of his abilities? Well, he explains that later on. He says, nowhere in this game does it tell me that my abilities should be used. And what he does is in the beginning of the game, he actually crops the screen so you can't see that the largest part of the user interface is a massive ability bar at the bottom of the screen that already had his abilities preloaded on it. But he claims this is bad design because the game simply hasn't instructed him to use it, and he never learned how to level up or anything like that, and so he has no idea how to add new abilities to his bar. But the game did, and if you scroll back in the video, you can see a big screen that says using abilities and has multiple pages, and all he had to do was click the next button. It would tell him how to do everything, and he clicked the X and closed it. Because again, he's a big famous MMO player. He doesn't need to read those stupid tutorials. Those are for plebeians. Those are... Now, I don't think Josh was actually thinking in that kind of manner. He seems to be a relatively down-to-earth person. I think he was just trying to do things quickly because he was recording all of this, and he wants to have interesting footage for people to watch. And in general, unless he finds something wrong with the tutorials, he's not really going to mention the tutorials too much. It's like, oh, there's a tutorial here, but you don't have to see it for that long. It's basically, oh, tutorial. That's all we need to go. Again, he's generally playing these MMOs anywhere from like 5 to like 20 hours, depending on the MMO, to get a decent feel for them. And you don't want to waste a bunch of time looking at stuff that he's going to be explaining as he's playing. He's like, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. Again, it's one of the reasons why I love the MMO, Worst MMO Ever series, because it does give you a good idea of how the MMO plays. And there's a couple that I have started playing specifically because Josh Strife Hayes had them on Worst MMO Ever, and they weren't the worst MMO ever. But again, it was that expertise that led him into issues. Because he's like, well, every other RPG forces me to learn this system. This made it completely optional. You could miss it, and so I did. And I'm starting to see that in tabletop RPG reviews and other things like that, where people that have a significant amount of experience in tabletop RPGs will immediately dismiss an RPG or something because they're like, oh, well, I don't like this system because it's similar to a system that I know, and that system doesn't work. And they just automatically assume that, well, obviously this RPG is copying this one, and I don't like this one, so I'm not going to like that one. And it really annoys me because, again, it's expertise that's working against you. The more experience that you get and the more information that you gather from just working in a field long enough, the easier it is to start missing things simply because you assume it is like the dozens or hundreds or thousands of other situations that were similar to it. And as a way to reduce workload on yourself and also to make things quicker, you just go, well, I'm not going to do the actual work that's involved in me dealing with this. I'm just going to assume it's the same as these other things and then apply the fix that worked for those things. And again, a lot of times that does work. But in the instances where it doesn't, you are doing yourself, and in the occasion that you're reviewing or recommending something to someone else, you are doing your audience a huge disservice by not coming in to a system blank effectively, without any preconceived notions. And I will tell you right now, that is an extremely difficult thing to do. The idea of separating player knowledge from character knowledge is a very difficult thing to do because a lot of times people have a hard time compartmentalizing aspects of their knowledge base. And that becomes even more difficult when it's not because you're pretending to be a different person. You are being you, experiencing this, and you have to basically trick your mind into going, I've never played an RPG before. And I just don't see a lot of people that can do that or even think that that's something that they need to do. A lot of people wear this badge of honor. I played all the way back to 1st edition. Let me tell you that 5th edition sucks. because, it doesn't do this like first edition. Well, yeah, this because it's not first edition. It's not second edition. It's not third edition. It's definitely not fourth edition. It's fifth edition. And if you go into it, instead of trying to find the things that you liked in the old system, and when they're not there, you get mad, you come into it completely blank and go, hey, let's look into this and see what it is. That's what I try to do when I do my in-depth reviews. I do everything I can to be as blind and blank as I can be if it's a brand new RPG, or if it is an RPG from a supplement book to an RPG that I already know. I try to grade each book on its own as much as I can. I will make references to other books in this series, especially like when I review my Essence 20 stuff. I have made mention quite a few times that the Essence 20 system is getting really complicated at this point, and it wasn't. But because they've added so many additional systems and so many new things that you can do, it's become a very complicated system. It's not quite Pathfinder 2nd Edition or Pathfinder 1st Edition, but it's getting close to that now. So, yeah, like I said, I found it really, really interesting that I've seen some very, very wise, intelligent people make really, really stupid judgment calls in a number of things, not just reviews, but I've watched countless times where they hear something and go, well, I know that this has happened to other people and this is how it responded to that, and so I'm going to assume that this is what's going on, and they just completely ignore everything else about what is being said or what's happening. Just go, well, it's similar to a situation I saw before, so I'm just going to assume they're the same. And it really happens significantly more often the more experience somebody has in any given field. The more times you see the same things happen over and over again, the more common it is for you to just assume that it's always that. And again, it can be a useful time-saving and work-saving solution, but it does a huge disservice to literally everything. Even if you're right, you are not putting the time and effort in to actually figure out what's wrong and come up with a solution for that problem. You're comparing it to another problem and hoping that the same solution works. And even if that solution does work, it's probably not going to be the perfect solution for that, because you haven't actually learned what the problem is. You've gone, oh, this is similar to another problem, so I'm just going to use a solution I already came up with. Or, hey, this is similar to another game that I don't like, so I'm just going to use the same review that I gave to that one, or the same opinion I had of that game, I'm going to force onto this game. So, anyway, it's just something that really, really annoys me. Mostly because, again, I have been on the receiving end where somebody did it in the wrong situation and nearly died. And I've also seen things that I really, really enjoy get really bad reviews and get lambasted by people simply because they go, well, I see this thing and it makes me think of this other thing, and because I don't like this other thing, I'm going to just assume this is the same thing. Or another thing that happens really common as well is you see something that you really like and go, oh, that's like this other thing that I really like. And so I'm going to assume it's going to work the exact same way as that other thing. And then this happens mostly in video games. They try to play this other game like this game that they like, and then they get really, really upset when their playstyle doesn't work in the new game, because the new game is not designed to work like the other game. But they just assume that it will because it has something in common with it. I see this all the time with even just different iterations of like the Soulsborne franchise. I'll see people get mad that like Dark Souls 2 didn't work like Dark Souls 1, or combat in Dark Souls 3 doesn't work the same way as combat in Elden Ring, or things like that. And people get really, really upset. They go, well, this worked perfectly in Dark Souls 3. Yeah, because it's a different game. It uses a different system. It uses different everything. And again, I've seen the same thing. A really, really good example. I know we're not allowed to talk about this, but I've been excommunicated from the Critters so many times. I don't know if I'm even allowed to call myself a critter anymore. But anyway, if you remember back to the dark ages of Tiberius Stormwind, who we don't talk about. If you have no idea what that is, there's lots of videos online about it. I'm not going to go into details, but the original Vox Machina campaign for Critical Role started as a Pathfinder game. And then, because Pathfinder is a bitch to stream, because it's a massively complicated system and it's really, really hard to follow visually if you're not actually playing it, they decided to switch over to D&D 5th edition, which was the best decision they probably have ever made. It's the reason that Critical Role is as big as it is now. However, translating characters from one system to another means that the things that you used to be able to do in the old system aren't going to work in the new system. And I remember specifically Orion, who's the player that played Tiberius Stormwind, getting really mad, or not really mad, just frustrated during like a Q&A after a game, where he's talking about how in Pathfinder he had this really awesome combo where there was a spell apparently that was like Water Sphere or something like that. And the way that it worked was when the Water Sphere was conjured, anyone that was effectively touching the Water Sphere would get sucked into the middle of it. And then you could move the Water Sphere around. And so there used to be this combo that Tiberius would do, is he would get all these things in the Water Sphere, and then he'd use lightning on it and just fry anyone inside the Water Sphere. Well, there is a Water Sphere type spell in D&D 5th edition, I believe. Or at least there was something that Matt Mercer made that was similar to it. I'm actually going to check just to see if there's... Maybe it was Control Water. Maybe that's what it was. Part Water, redirect, full, roll, pull. No, it wasn't Control Water. It definitely wasn't that. Will of Water, Water Breathing, Water Walk. Watery Sphere. There we go. So yeah, there's an actual spell called Watery Sphere. But it doesn't work the same way in D&D 5th edition as it does in Pathfinder. And so when kind of translating the characters over, Orion just decided he was going to use Watery Sphere the exact same way. Well, the systems are so different that Watery Sphere can't work that way like it did in Pathfinder. And that made him really upset, because it's like, well, it worked this way in the other game. Why doesn't it work in this game? Because it's a different game, and you need to take the time to learn how the new game works. There's tons of really cool combinations you can do in D&D 5th edition. He was just really, really upset that the system that he was using before, that he liked better, because I'm going to be blunt on this. Pathfinder is made for min-maxers. 100%. Pathfinder, specifically Pathfinder 1st Edition, is a min-maxer's wet dream. There are so many kind of broken builds in Pathfinder that if you build your character correctly, they are impossible to touch, especially if they're a spellcaster. So the reason he liked my theory of the reason that he liked that system was really, really easy to break. And he liked playing the broken character. And 5th edition is significantly more difficult to break. It's a better designed system. Get mad at me all you want. It's true. And so because of that, he got really, really frustrated because his broken combo doesn't work anymore, and he couldn't come up with another way to break the game. And that was very frustrating for him. So again, it's that idea of experience becoming a detriment. Because had he just learned the new system, again, there's plenty of really cool combos in 5th edition. They don't become quite as broken as you can get in Pathfinder, but you can still do some really, really amazing combos. And if you work together as a team, you can get some very broken combinations. Single character breakedness doesn't really work that well in 5th edition. And all the channels that go, here, you want to see the most broken combo? They're generally using either outdated rules or intentionally misrepresenting how rules work in the game. I cannot tell you. I had one person that tried to argue, I think it was in one of my comment sections, tried to argue that the monk, I can't remember what they are, but they basically get I think it's the Astral Monk. There we go. Way the Astral form. They get magic astral arms, which is super cool. I like it, but they decided that that monk could do like 66 damage per attack. I'm like, how in the world do you do that? Well, what you do is you take the creature and you grapple it, and then you throw it into the air. And because you can throw something, up to 30 feet, you throw it 30 feet in the air, it goes all the way down, and it takes, or you throw it 60 feet in the air, and then it comes down and takes 66 damage. That's significantly more damage than you will ever do swinging your fist. So I'm like, none of that is true. So, well, yes, you can. You can do this because Chris Perkins said that somebody could throw a halfling. I said, okay, that was a specific ruling on a specific incident, and it has nothing to do with what you're describing. The ruling that Perkins made was specifically about doing effectively what's called a fastball special, which is the term they get from X-Men. And it's because Colossus used to take Wolverine, which a lot of people don't realize this. Wolverine is short. If I remember correctly, he's either 5'6" or 5'4". He's a real short Canadian dude. And Colossus is big, strong Russian man. And he's made out of metal. And so what Colossus used to do is he would pick up Wolverine and he would throw him at bad guys. And Wolverine, with his healing factor and adamantine skeleton and everything, he was perfectly fine if he got chucked into something. And he liked it because he could get there quicker and faster and then just go Rawr! So somebody wanted to do a fastball special in D&D throwing a halfling. I think it was a half giant. What are they called? Whatever half giants are called in modern D&D. I can't remember off the top of my head. They were introduced in the Elemental Evil Companion. Anyway, half giant throwing a halfling, and they said that he could go, this far. And I go, okay. So that was a willing combatant that was being thrown directly at an enemy, which you're describing is an unwilling combatant being thrown straight up. Gravity works very, very differently when you are fighting perpendicular to it versus directly against it. Like if the pull of gravity is down and you're throwing this way, it's going to lower things, but you're going to be able to throw significantly farther than if you just go straight up and you have to fight directly against good gravity. It's one of the reasons why flying around the world is significantly easier than breaking the Earth's gravity and going into space. And so I sat there and I did all these numbers and I said, and after doing all the calculations, I'm like, see, at most you might get 2d6 fall damage, which is significantly worse than the 4 attacks you could make, which even at this level, you're looking at 4d6 plus 20. So no, nothing you said actually works the way that it was, and it's just you misunderstanding or intentionally misinterpreting things. So anyway, back to the whole topic of this. Watch out for your own expertise. It will get you in trouble more often than you would think, and try to learn how to enter a situation from a completely neutral standpoint. Especially if you're doing something like a review or a how-to video. That's another thing where I saw this happen constantly. If people were trying to teach someone something else, if they have a lot of experience, they're going to just forget to say certain things because it's second nature to them. So anyway, that's just my little rant for today. It's all for me today. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.